So we're talking about tools, recovery device tools. That's what we have here. We have just a couple of the broad sampling of recovery devices. You have to have recovery tools if you're going to do air conditioning. So your choices are very expensive to very economical. Most of the time you're going to get what you pay for. If you get a very expensive recovery tool, it's going to last you longer, and in the long run it's going to be a better value. A lot of times we have to start out with something more simple just because cost. We need a lot of tools. We have to save cost initially. So when you're looking at recovery tools, always look at the overall value. Also, I want you to notice on this machine here, I actually added a dryer on the inlet side. So you can buy these little flare dryers, put a hose on them, protect your investment. So put them on the front of the machine, so if you're recovering a burnout or some other debris in the system, it'll stop it before it gets into your really nice recovery machine. You can also consider these concentrators. This is basically just a copper worm inside in a housing, and its whole purpose is during the recovery process to cool that liquid that we're shoving into the recovery tank. The cooler we make it, the more we're going to get in the tank, and the quicker we're going to get it in the tank. So you might consider that. It comes as an option on most recovery devices. It's kind of necessary depending on how much we're recovering, how hot it is, the whole bit. So here's two of the recovery tools. Look at the market, compare the warranties, compare the values overall, and take good care of them. They'll last you a long time. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about the EPA, the 608 certification that we all need as air conditioning technicians. So the EPA wants us to be certified in what they call 608. 608 allows us to handle refrigerants, but mainly it makes us aware of the impact if we handle them incorrectly and the effect that they have on the ozone. So we have to be EPA certified. So every technician must be EPA certified right here at the top. Also, it's good for the environment. Okay, so these refrigerants, a lot of the refrigerants we use today, even the 410, some of the more modern refrigerants are still, if not harmful to the ozone, then they contribute to global warming. So it's good for the environment to practice these things. Although it's the law, it's still good for the environment. We also have on here that we must stay current. So once we get our certification, we have to stay current with the changes. As things change, we have to find those changes and we have to apply those changes. The EPA is not going to send us a notification that something's changed. We have to do that up on ourselves and stay current. We also, finally, we're going to use these EPA applications every single day. Now what I have here just to show you is I have a couple of gauges on the bench, and one of the gauges I've hooked up to a R22 machine, and one of the gauges I've hooked up to an R410 machine. Something that you will do every day in your diagnostics as you travel around from house to house. The 410 machine set of gauges is much higher pressure because 410 refrigerant is higher pressure. Now, because the EPA requires us to use low loss fittings on our hoses, every time we unhook the hose from the AC unit, it keeps refrigerant in the hose, okay? It doesn't vent it out in the atmosphere, it holds it. So the pressure's in here. The 410 refrigerant is still in my gauges, all right? The R22 machine runs on a little bit lower pressure, but that refrigerant is now contained in this set of gauges. And it will stay in here until I hook it up to the next machine. Now, here's the thing. If I hook up to another R22 machine with my R22 gauges, it's okay. Most likely there won't be any exchange of refrigerant because the pressures will be similar to the same. Okay, now the problem is if I take this set of gauges that have 410 refrigerant in them right now, it's under a higher pressure than my R22 machine would be. This refrigerant is going to instantly go in the R22 machine. Now I'm going to have an R22 machine with 410 refrigerant in it. I'm going to have a mismatch. I've just messed up the whole charge, and I'm going to have to recover it. And worse than that, I'm going to have to dispose of the recovered refrigerant. Okay, so that is some everyday things that this law applies to us that we have to deal with every day. Getting certified is easy. You can go basically anywhere and get an EPA study guide as little as 10 or 12 pages for a few bucks. Go pay 40, 50 bucks, take the exam, get your EPA certification. It doesn't make you a licensed AC contractor, it just means you're EPA certified. Now what I want to show you now is what another thing that can happen. I'm going to bring up a vacuum pump. This is a really good older style vacuum pump that's in use today, works great, has a vent on the top where normally the gases are going to vent while we're using this pump. If you notice, I put a plastic bag over that vent, and here's the reason why. Okay, this happens all the time. You'll take your set of gauges, you're gonna hook up to this vacuum pump because you're fixing to pull a vacuum. Remember, the low loss gauges are holding pressure. When you hook it up to the pump, it's going to pressurize the pump, and the oil is going to come out the top. I'm going to try to demonstrate that for you if we can make it happen. It's happened several times. I've seen it. I don't know if I can duplicate it, but I'm going to try. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hook up my gauges, my low loss fitting here. These gauges aren't hooked up to anything else, so it's only the refrigerant in the gauges. And I'm going to hook it up to the vacuum pump, just like I would if I was going to be pulling a vacuum. So you can see what's happening right there. You see all of this? That's oil coming out of the pump. Okay, well, normally what would happen, if I would have been leaning over this pump when I did that, I would have got it in the face. Another good reason to always wear your safety glasses. If this happened in a retail environment, it would be possibly all over the food counters. This happens all the time. So we have to always be mindful of what's going on in these gauges before we hook them up to an AC unit or some sort of vacuum pump. If we want to get them out of the gauges, we're going to have to get our recovery machine out. We're going to have to recover them. So those are two good reasons why we want to follow the EPA rules, and why, because of those rules, we want to be extra careful in what we do with our gauges. Okay, so we're going to do a recovery now, and we're going to actually recover some R22 refrigerant. I've got it set up, I've got my hoses connected, I've got a small recovery machine here that's I'm going to use just because it's small to be out of the way during the shoot. We've got our recovery tank sitting up here on the scales, and we're all connected. I'm ready to get started. So safety first, we're going to put our safety glasses on. You do have to be EPA certified to do recovery anytime you're messing with any refrigerant, and I am. So the first thing I'm going to do is get all my stuff turned on. We're going to turn on our gauges. We are using our electronic gauges again. Don't have to, but they're already here. And we'll turn on our scale, and we will zero it out. So our scale is zeroed out. Our gauges are on. Nothing is turned on pressure-wise yet. I haven't opened any gauges. I haven't opened the hose to the tank, but I'm ready to do so now. So once I start recovery, what's going to happen is we're going to take refrigerant out of this machine, and we're going to bring it through the hose into the recovery machine itself, out the hose into the recovery tank. Now these recovery vessels cannot be filled over 80%, which is another good reason to weigh them. So you always want to have your recovery tank on a scale. You always, if you're moving refrigerant in or out, you always need to weigh it. I need to know how much I'm taking out of this unit. I won't know that if I don't weigh it. So I'm going to weigh it out. I know what I expect it to be, but I'm going to weigh it out. So I'm going to also turn on this AC unit because it can make liquid much faster since it runs than if I have to vapor recover it. I can recover it just as it sits here, just by turning on the machine, and I can bring it all out as a vapor, and it'll be much slower. We're talking about probably an hour. So if I run the condensing unit, it's going to turn it into a liquid much quicker than this little machine can do, and then I'll just cycle it through the machine into the tank. So I'll go ahead and start up the condenser, and I'll try to talk over it so you can hear. So the condenser's running, but I haven't done anything else. So one of the first things I want to do is get my recovery machine up and running so that I don't have a vapor lock condition. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it on, open the exit, and I'm going to open my tank. So it's capable of going in the tank, but I don't have anything going to the recovery machine yet. That's still closed. So I'm going to open my high side line, and make sure my scale's zeroed. Zero on my scale. Open open my high side. Now I can control it from right here on the recovery machine. This is the inlet, and it's closed, so nothing's moving through the hose. As I start to open it, I should start getting some liquid. I can see my gauge moving. If I look at the scale, I'll start getting some readings here in just a second. There we go. Now we're starting to get some liquid moving. I can meter this. So I can open and close this valve as much as I want, but it's liquid going through here right now, and I don't want to hurt the machine. I don't want to overextend it. So it actually has a little position that says liquid, and that's where I'm at. I can see by the gauges that it's working. If I look at my scale, I've got 7 ounces in it. If I look at my gauges here, my pressures are coming down, so it's doing exactly what I want it to do. I'm able to utilize this condenser to turn this into a liquid for me right here, then I can extract that liquid, and it's just much quicker this way. So everything is going like I want it to. I'm just going to keep watching my scale. I've got 10 ounces, so I might try to go ahead and just increase this, open it up a little more. And I'm listening to the machine to see if I'm struggling it. It seems to be handling it. How's my scale? 17 ounces, so it's going in quite nicely. My pressures are coming down, meaning I'm taking the refrigerant out of the condenser, just like I want to. We'll just keep watching. Everything's looking good. My condenser's still running. It's making liquid for me. I've got 24 ounces now. I'm expecting it to be 50 or so. So I'm not going to push it too much, but I'm going to open it just a little more. Try that. See what we got. Just fixed it. We just hit 30 ounces, so it's going very well. This would not be going this fast if I was not utilizing this condenser. The condenser is making all of this liquid for me much quicker than this machine can do by itself. So if the condenser runs, you need to utilize it. Okay, another thing is, when we do this process, we heat up our recovery tank back here. This tank is going to get warm. So what can I do to speed the process up? Well, I can use a better machine, of course. I can cool my tank. I can put my recovery tank in ice water if I want to. And if I start having an issue, I can actually put a trash bag or something around this condenser and raise the head pressure. That'll shove it out a little more too. I don't have to do that today. Everything is going fine. I have 40 ounces now. I'll just hit 41. So we got a good pace going. I don't want to rush it. I'm still running my condenser. I am going to turn it off in a minute. This would be a good time to point out, if you can look here on this dryer, the bottom of it is got a reservoir because it's mounted horizontally. That's going to hold a little liquid. So it's going to take a little bit to boil it out of there. Just remember that. It won't be immediately gone. Okay, we're 46 ounces. Let me open this up a little bit more. Eventually I'll open it all the way, but we're still pushing liquid through it. 48 ounces. And our pressures are 18 pounds on the low side, 98 on the high side. So we are getting fairly empty. Everything's looking good. 50 ounces. Almost 51. I don't expect much over 59, so I think we're probably quite a ways along. 52 ounces. Now we're down to 13 pounds of pressure. It's coming down quite a bit. And below 100, in the 70s. 53.6 ounces, 0.8, 54 ounces, moving along very well. almost to the point I'm going to shut off my machine. But as long as I'm making this much liquid, I'm going to let it run. Okay, 55 ounces. I'm down to 5 psi on my low side, and 49 is coming down rather quick. It's almost to the point of turning off the AC unit. It's working very well. Now we're at 56. I'm going to open this up all the way. And I'm going to turn off the condenser, but I'm going to let the recovery machine run. Okay, so why did I turn off the condenser? Well, the main reason is now my compressor is running in here without coolant because I've taken it away. And we've talked about you cannot run a compressor without coolant. So if there's no cool vapor going back to the compressor, it's going to overheat rather quickly. So now it's off, and because it's off, I can open both of my gauges. It'll just be quicker this way because it's going in 2 hoses. So these are both open. You can probably see we got about 5 psi. That's very low. We're completely open here now, so we're doing vapor recovery. We're doing liquid recovery, now we're doing vapor recovery. A little slower, but if I had started the process this way, we'd be way not long at all. We'd be way far down the road. 57 ounces. You notice this is slowed up a little bit. Because we're doing a vapor recovery, we have to take the vapor now in our machine. Our recovery machine has to turn the vapor into a liquid first. So it's slower than the condenser was. 57.8. 1 pound of pressure, very, very low. Now we're less than a pound. So I would say we're very, very close. We're going to let it go down a little lower, then I'll shut it off. Okay, now we're actually below 0. These gauges now are reading in a vacuum, so we're pulling down into a vacuum. We're going to move very little now on the scale. I mean, it's pretty much going to sit there and might move a small amount. So I'm going to turn this off. I always turn off my gauges first, just because it's always our machine we're trying to protect. I'm going to close my valve, close my machine. Now, that order is not super important. What's important is that you close your gauges off. Now, you don't know why you recovered. Did you recover because I'm fixing to take this away and put a new one in? Am I just going to make a repair? Maybe I need to cut this out and replace it. Or maybe something's wrong with the sight glass. There's a lot of reasons I might have recovered this refrigerant. I might be fixing to put it all right back in. It depends. But the thing is, I want to take it out. Now, the EPA says I have to recover to 500 microns. I could do that. It would have took another 15 minutes or so of letting it run, and my gauge would have eventually read into microns, and we'd have got to that 500 microns. We're already at 0, and we're below 0, so we're there. We're just not in the micron scale. So this is a recovery of R22. The next step here would be to unhook all these hoses. They're low loss hoses with low loss fittings. So I can take these hoses off and it's not going to spray refrigerant in the atmosphere, which is exactly what the EPA is trying to avoid by mandating low loss hoses. So you saw there, not only did I take it all out, but there was no spray of refrigerant. The only other place there would be any would be in this one hose. And if you see, I've got a low loss fitting here, so I can take it off and I can capture that. Now this tank would go back to the reclaimer. It'll get reclaimed, it'll get reused. So that's an R22 recovery.